Carl had been a crane operator for over 20 years. He'd worked dozens of sites, from small buildings to giant city towers. Some nights were grueling, others boring. But there was one thing he always admitted to friends: construction sites. They're different after dark. During the day, cranes were noisy and alive, workers yelling, tools clanging, machinery roaring. But at night, the silence was immense. Sitting in that little cabin, 200 feet above the ground, Carl felt like the last man alive. At first, he loved it, the solitude, the city lights shimmering below. But over time, the stillness began to change. The higher the building rose, the more the crane swayed with the wind. The groaning steel, the faint rattles, the occasional knock, it all began to sound intentional. He brushed it off as fatigue. But then came the night that changed everything. It was close to 2 a.m. when Carl spotted it. Down in the unfinished skeleton of the building, a soft glow moved across the beams. At first, he assumed it was a guard doing rounds with a lantern or flashlight. But then he realized the site didn't have overnight guards anymore. Carl leaned forward, squinting through the cabin glass. The glow wove between steel beams, slow and deliberate. Then it stopped, and Carl saw the outline of a figure, just standing there. He couldn't see a face, just a silhouette caught in the glow. Yet somehow, even from stories above, he felt it. The figure was looking up, staring directly at him. A cold prickle crawled across his arms. He blinked, rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, the glow was gone. The next night, Carl almost convinced himself it was a dream. But then, around the same hour, the glow returned. Only this time, there wasn't one. There were 5. 5 distinct lights spread across different floors of the skeletal tower. Each glow framed a figure, each one completely still. And all of them, every single one, angled upward, toward his cabin. Carl's heart hammered. His hand hovered over the radio, but he didn't want to call it in. What would he even say? That people made of light were staring at him? Then the floodlights snapped on. The whole site bathed in harsh white. Relief rushed over him until it turned to dread. Because in the floodlights, the figures were still there. Clearer now, they weren't solid. Their edges shimmered, their forms blurred, but their posture silent, waiting, was unmistakable. Rows of them, like workers awaiting orders. Carl blinked hard. The floodlights flickered. The figures were closer. Another flicker, closer still. His breath hitched. He gripped the seat so hard his knuckles went white. Then, suddenly, the lights stabilized, empty beams, nothing else. But Carl couldn't shake the feeling he wasn't alone. Hours passed. The city slept beneath him. And the silence grew heavier, thicker. Carl swore he could hear voices carried on the wind. Not words exactly, just fragments. Sometimes a laugh. Sometimes a sigh. Sometimes his own name. ... Carl. He snapped his head around, the hair on his neck standing up. The cabin was empty. Of course it was. Yet the voice had been inside. Carl shut off his radio, thinking maybe interference was playing tricks. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew stronger. It was then he noticed something else. The crane was moving. Not much, just a slow, unnatural sway. Too steady to be wind. He grabbed the controls, steadying the hook. But the sway kept going, deliberate, back and forth, like someone was guiding it. Then came the sound. A knock from beneath the cabin. Carl froze. His cabin was over 150 feet above the ground. No one could be under him. And yet, knock, knock, steady, rhythmic, like someone climbing. He dared a glance down, and for the briefest second, he saw it. A silhouette on the crane's arm, climbing upward, too thin, too tall, its body bending in ways bones shouldn't. Carl blinked, gone. But the knocking continued. Louder now, closer. He locked the cabin door. His chest tightened. He couldn't breathe properly, each inhale shallow and sharp. The rest of the night was a blur of noise and shadows. Every time Carl closed his eyes, he swore he saw faces pressed against the cabin glass. Not full faces, just impressions, as though someone had leaned close enough to fog the window with breath. By the time the first light of dawn broke, he hadn't moved. His hands were still clenched on the controls, his body stiff. Finally, he forced himself to climb down. Each rung of the ladder felt like it would snap. Each gust of wind sounded like a voice urging him not to look back. But when he reached the ground, he did. And what he saw froze him. High above, in the crane cabin he had just left, a figure sat in the operator's chair, perfectly still, watching him. Carl stumbled back, heart pounding, eyes wide. He blinked. Gone. The cabin was empty. He never worked another night shift again. And when his friends asked why, Carl gave the same answer, over and over. Up there, you're supposed to look down at the city. But that night, the city looked back. Ethan worked as a night security guard for a half-finished office tower downtown. At first, he thought the job was easy money, just walking patrols, making sure no one broke in to steal copper wiring or tools. The building was skeletal, unfinished concrete floors stacked 20 stories high, exposed beams, staircases that rattled, and plastic sheets that flapped in the wind. For the first week, nothing happened. Ethan mostly killed time drinking coffee and scrolling on his phone. But he hated one part of the job, the echo. Every step he took echoed back to him seconds later, bouncing in odd ways through the hollow structure. Sometimes it felt like the echo was delayed too long, like there was someone following him a few steps behind. On his 5th night, Ethan climbed to the 10th floor. The moment he stepped out of the stairwell, he felt it. The air shifted colder, heavier, like the atmosphere had thickened. He rubbed his arms, shining his flashlight around. The beam caught the edge of something strange. In the far corner of the floor, where he knew there should only be a wall, stood a narrow opening. A doorway. And froze. He had studied the blueprints during training. There was no doorway on the 10th floor, no hallway there. Just a load-bearing wall. Yet now it stood open. Cautiously, he stepped closer. His boots echoed too loudly, bouncing back like the sound was traveling through a cavern. He whispered to himself, "That shouldn't be here." The opening led into a narrow hall, bare concrete. No markings. The kind of unfinished tunnel you might see in a basement. Ethan walked in a few feet, his light bouncing across raw gray walls. Then behind him, a sound, a footstep. He spun, flashlight cutting back toward the opening. Nothing, just empty air. But when he turned around, the hallway had changed. The doorway was gone. He was staring at a solid wall of concrete. His heart slammed in his chest. He pressed his palms against it, searching for seams, for the way back. The wall was cold, rough, solid. Then his radio hissed. Loud static tore through the silence. He grabbed it, about to call in, when he heard it. A whisper in the static. Not one voice, but many. Layered, overlapping, speaking words he couldn't understand. Low, drawn out, urgent. His pulse spiked. He stumbled backward, and suddenly the wall was a doorway again. The hallway had vanished. He was back on the 10th floor. Shaking, he ran down the stairs 2 floors before stopping to breathe. The echo of his own running footsteps followed him long after he stopped. The next morning, he checked the blueprints again. No hallway, no doorway. Nothing had changed. Ethan still works security, but he never goes above the 9th floor. If anyone asks why, he just mutters, "Some floors weren't built for us." Maria had always prided herself on being level-headed. She wasn't the type to scare easily. After all, she had spent nearly 15 years in construction management, working in half-finished towers, deep basements, and creaking scaffolds. She'd heard all the ghost stories. None of them bothered her. But this sight, this one was different. The building was supposed to be the tallest in the city, a 40-story glass and steel monument. But for now, it was just bone steel beams crisscrossing like a giant cage. During the day, it rang with the sounds of drills, hammers, and shouting workers. At night, it became a graveyard of shadows. That Friday, Maria stayed late to double-check paperwork. By the time she looked up from her desk, everyone was gone. The site was empty. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the occasional flap of tarp in the wind. She decided to take one last walk through the upper levels, just to be sure everything was locked. She grabbed her flashlight and hard hat, clipped her radio to her belt, and started up the stairwell. The higher she climbed, the more muffled the city became. By the 10th floor, it was silent except for her own boots. Each step echoed far too long, like the sound was stretching unnaturally through the beams. Then she heard it, scraping. It was faint at first, like someone dragging a boot heel across steel. She stopped, shining her flashlight around. Nothing. The floor was empty. She kept walking. The sound followed. Slow, deliberate, always a few steps behind her. Maria spun around her light, darting across open space. The beams stretched into the dark like skeletal ribs. Empty, she called out, her voice firm. If someone's up here, you're trespassing. Identify yourself. No reply, only silence. Her heart ticked faster. She pressed the radio. Control, this is Maria. Did anyone stay behind on the upper levels tonight? Static, the radio hissed, then went quiet. She took a breath, telling herself it was interference. Maybe the building's frame was blocking the signal. Then her flashlight flickered. For an instant, she saw it. A shadow stretched long across the steel floor, stretched thin like a person's outline. But there was no one there to cast it. Her breath caught. She stepped back, sweeping her light around wildly, and as she did, more shadows appeared. One by one, sliding along the beams, twisting unnaturally, darker than the night itself. Dozens of them. They didn't move like people. They rippled, stretched, bent in ways bodies couldn't. But they all had the same focus turning toward her. The scraping grew louder, surrounding her. Maria shut off her flashlight instinctively, thinking maybe if she couldn't see them, they'd disappear. But that was when she realized her mistake. She could still see them. Even in total darkness, the shadows were visible blacker than black, gliding silently toward her. Her lungs tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs felt heavy, rooted to the steel. Finally, she forced herself to move, stumbling back toward the stairwell. The scraping chased her, echoing from every side. Halfway there, she tripped on a loose beam. Her helmet clattered across the floor, the sound bouncing into the hollow night. The shadows stopped. They froze mid-motion, as though listening. Maria didn't breathe, didn't blink. The silence stretched, then slowly the shadows began to melt. They slid back into the steel, vanishing into the beams themselves, until nothing remained. Maria scrambled to her feet and bolted down the stairwell, not stopping until she reached her car. She resigned the following Monday. When her boss asked why, Maria only said, "Shadows aren't supposed to move when the light's gone."